My name is Emma. I'm 32 years old, and for 5 years I believed I knew my husband better than anyone else in the world. Richard was the kind of man every woman dreams of finding, you know. Tall, green eyes that seemed to look directly into your soul, a smile that melted any tension, and that deep voice that calmed me on the hardest days. I met Richard at a coffee shop in Boston on a rainy October afternoon when I was still trying to recover from a disastrous previous relationship. He was sitting alone, reading a philosophy book I would never have the courage to open, and when our eyes met, it was as if the entire universe had conspired for that moment. I know it sounds cliché, but I swear it was exactly like that. We started talking about trivialities, about the weather, about the quality of coffee at that place. And before I realized it, it was already 4 in the afternoon, and the rain had completely stopped. Richard asked for my number. I gave it without thinking twice, and 3 days later, we were having dinner at an Italian restaurant where he insisted on ordering red wine because it matched my brown eyes, according to him. Our relationship was intense from the beginning, but not in that suffocating way that makes you lose your breath from anxiety, you know? It was intense in a good sense, in the sense that every moment together seemed to really matter. Richard worked as a financial consultant, traveled a lot for work, but always found time to call me, to send me funny messages during the day, to plan our weekends. After 2 years of dating, he proposed to me during a trip to Ireland, kneeling on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, with the wind messing up my hair and tears running down my face before I could even say yes. We got married 6 months later, in a small but beautiful ceremony, with just close family and some friends, exactly as I had always wanted. And then our married life began in an old but charming house on the outskirts of Boston, a house that Richard chose and that I loved the first moment I walked through the door. It had a huge garden where I planted roses, a spacious kitchen with those big windows that let the sun in the morning, and an office on the second floor where Richard spent hours working when he wasn't traveling. Everything seemed perfect, absolutely perfect, until small, strange things started to appear that at the time I simply ignored because when you love someone, you tend to ignore small things that don't make immediate sense, right? For example, Richard had this strange thing about privacy. He never left his phone unlocked near me, always put the screen down when it was on the table, and if I got close when he was on the phone, he quickly ended the conversation or left the room. At first, I thought it was just his quirk, maybe something work-related, professional confidentiality and such things. I myself work as a graphic designer and understand that sometimes we deal with confidential client information. But there was also his office. The office. That place was practically a forbidden sanctuary. Richard made it very clear from the first day we lived together that the office was his space, that he needed that privacy to work, that he had important client documents, and that I should respect that boundary. And I respected it. Of course I respected it. Because I'm not the type of person who rummages through her husband's things, who invades others' privacy, who becomes suspicious of everything. Or at least I wasn't, until that Thursday in March that changed absolutely everything in my life. But I'm going too fast. Let me go back a bit and provide better context, because this story needs you to understand how we got to that point, how things accumulated until they exploded in a way I could never, ever have imagined. So, besides the phone and office issue, there were the trips. Richard traveled a lot, maybe 2 or 3 times a month, sometimes for just 2 days, sometimes for a whole week. He said he needed to meet clients, close deals, attend conferences. I never questioned it because it was part of his job, and honestly, the trips seemed to pay well financially. Our bank account was always healthy. I never had to worry about money. Richard was generous and always said I didn't need to stress about work if I didn't want to, although I loved my work and would never think of stopping. But there was something about the trips that started to bother me in the last 6 months, before that fateful Thursday. Richard would come back different, you know? Not completely different, but there was a subtle change in his energy, as if he brought something back with him, something invisible but palpable. He would become more distant for a few days, more thoughtful. Sometimes I caught him staring into nothing, with an expression I couldn't decipher. When I asked if everything was okay, he always smiled, hugged me, and said it was just tiredness, that traveling was exhausting, that soon he would return to normal. And he did return, always returned, and I convinced myself that I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid for no reason. There's one more thing I need to tell you, and this one is important. Richard had a specific drawer in his office, a drawer in the old wooden desk he brought from some antique store when we moved in. It was the middle drawer, on the right side, and it had a lock. That's right, an old-fashioned lock of those that you need a small key to open. And Richard kept that drawer always locked, always. I know this because in the few times I entered his office to bring coffee or notify him about something important, I noticed that that drawer was locked while all the others remained normally open. Once, just once about 2 years ago, I casually asked what he kept in there, and he answered evasively, something about very important client documents, contracts that needed to be secure, things like that. It made sense at the time, and I never asked again. But that drawer stayed there, in my consciousness, like a small question mark that I chose to ignore because, after all, everyone has a right to a little privacy, right? Marriage doesn't mean you need to know absolutely everything about the other person. Doesn't mean there can't be small spaces just yours. Or that's what I told myself to justify not questioning further, to avoid being that type of controlling and insecure wife I always despised. Now let's go to that Thursday in March, the day that divided my life into before and after, the day that made me question absolutely everything I thought I knew about the man I shared my bed with every night. It was an ordinary morning. Richard had traveled the night before to New York, would be away for 3 days according to him, something about a series of meetings with an important client. I was working from home, had a big branding project for a tech startup that was consuming all my time and attention. Around 10 in the morning, I was in the kitchen preparing my third coffee of the day when my phone rang. It was Margaret, Richard's mother, a lovely lady in her early 60s who had always been extremely kind to me. She was calling to let me know she had found some old documents of Richard's, certificates and papers from when he was a child, things she thought he might want to keep. Margaret lives about an hour away and said she would stop by our house in the late afternoon to drop off a box with these things. I said it was fine, that I would be home working and could receive them. We hung up and I went back to my work, thinking about finishing at least the conceptual part of the project before lunch. But then, around 11:30, my laptop simply shut down. Just like that, out of nowhere. The battery had died and I had forgotten to connect the charger. The problem was that my charger was defective. I knew that, had even ordered a new one online, but it hadn't arrived yet. I stood there, looking at my laptop's black screen, frustrated because I was at a crucial moment in the work and couldn't just stop. That's when I remembered that Richard had a laptop in his office, a laptop he used occasionally when working from home. He had never explicitly said I couldn't use it, but he had never offered either. I stood there in the kitchen, debating with myself whether I should or shouldn't go into the office and borrow his laptop. It seemed like such a small thing. So insignificant, just using his computer for a few hours until mine started working again. It wasn't as if I was going to rummage through his things, mess with his files, invade his privacy. It was just borrowing an object he clearly wasn't using since he was in New York. So I decided there was nothing wrong with it and went up the stairs to the second floor. Richard's office was at the end of the hallway, a dark wooden door that was closed but not locked because he never locked the door. Only that damn drawer. I opened the door slowly, as if I were doing something forbidden, even knowing I technically wasn't, and entered the room. The office smelled like him, that woody perfume mixed with old paper and leather from the books that filled the shelves. The desk was organized as always, some papers stacked on one side, an old pen holder, a bronze lamp he adored. And there, in the corner of the table, was his laptop, closed and probably turned off. I went there, picked up the laptop, and was about to leave the office when something fell from the desk and hit the floor with a metallic sound. I looked down and saw it was a key ring that had been hidden under some papers. I picked up the keys from the floor to put them back in place, And that's when I noticed something. One of the keys was small, old-fashioned, exactly the type that would open an old lock. And in an impulse that to this day I don't know completely where it came from, I looked at the middle drawer on the right side of the desk. That drawer that had always been locked, that held those important documents, that was forbidden territory. My heart started beating faster, and I felt ridiculous for being so nervous about a drawer. But something inside me, some instinct I had ignored for too long, was screaming that I needed to open that drawer. I stood there for maybe 2 full minutes, the keys in my hand, looking at that drawer, debating internally whether I should or shouldn't do it. Part of me said I was about to cross a line, that I was about to violate my husband's trust in a way that couldn't be undone. But another part, a deeper and wiser part, said something was wrong, that it had been wrong for a long time, and that I deserved to know the truth, whatever that truth was. So I did it. I took the little key, knelt in front of the desk, put the key in the lock, and turned. I heard the soft click of the lock opening and pulled the drawer slowly. I don't know what I expected to find in there. Maybe really boring work documents, maybe contracts or financial papers. But it wasn't any of that. Inside the drawer were several things that made my stomach turn instantly. First, I saw a passport, but not Richard's normal passport that I had seen a few times. I picked up the passport with trembling hands and opened it to the photo page. It was Richard without a doubt, but the name under the photo wasn't Richard Thompson, my husband's name. The name was James Mitchell. I kept looking at it without being able to process what I was seeing. Maybe it was some fake document for work, I thought. Maybe financial consultants needed alternative identities for some kind of secret operation. I know it sounds ridiculous, but my brain was desperately trying to find a rational explanation for that. I put the passport aside and saw there were more things in the drawer. There was another passport, this one with the name David Harrington, but the same photo of Richard, and another, Thomas Bradley. 3 different passports, 3 different names, same person. My breathing was getting faster, and I felt as if the floor was moving under my feet. What the hell was this? Why did my husband have 3 fake passports with different names? I continued rummaging through the drawer and found driver's licenses, also with different names, but Richard's photo. There were credit cards, several of them, all with names that weren't Richard Thompson. And then, at the bottom of the drawer, I found something that made my heart literally stop for a second. It was a photo, an old and slightly faded photo, of Richard with a woman. They were hugging, smiling, looked in love. The woman was pretty, blonde, must have been about 30 years old at the time of the photo. I turned the photo over and saw something written by hand on the back, in handwriting I recognized as Richard's. It simply said, "Olivia, always my soulmate, June 2019. June 2019. I did the math quickly in my head. June 2019 was only 6 months before Richard and I got married. 6 months before our wedding, he was with another woman, a woman he called his soulmate. I felt nausea rising in my throat and had to breathe deeply several times not to vomit right there on the office floor. But I didn't stop, couldn't stop even if I wanted to, because now I needed to know, needed to understand who the man I had married was, the man who slept beside me every night, the man who told me he loved me every morning before leaving for work. I rummaged through the drawer more and found a cell phone, one of those older models, cheap and disposable. I turned on the phone, and to my surprise, it still had battery and wasn't password protected. I opened the messages and started reading. They were conversations with different people. Most of them seemed to be about business, but strange business, with codes and coded language I couldn't completely understand. But there was one conversation in particular that caught my attention. It was with someone saved only as V, and the messages were from 3 weeks ago, quite recent therefore. Richard, or James, or David, or Thomas, or whoever he really was, had written, "The Boston job is complete, transferring to the usual account." And V had responded, "Excellent, next target is Chicago, you know what to do." What job? What target? What account? None of this made the slightest sense, and I was starting to panic for real. I continued digging through the phone and found photos, dozens of photos of people I didn't know, photos that seemed to have been taken without the people knowing because they were from far away, out of focus, as if they were surveillance photos. There were photos of buildings, of car license plates, of addresses. It seemed like movie stuff, seemed absolutely surreal that this was happening to me, in my house, with my husband. I turned off the phone because I couldn't look at it anymore and went back to the drawer. There was a brown envelope at the bottom that I hadn't seen yet. I took the envelope and opened it, taking out several documents. They were copies of birth certificates, of different people, none of them Richard Thompson. There were property documents of real estate in different cities, Denver, Seattle, Miami. There were bank statements from accounts that weren't ours with absurd amounts of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars going in and out. And then I found something that made me freeze completely. It was an official document, seemed to be from a government agency, dated 2015, 7 years before I met Richard. The document talked about a witness protection program, about identity relocation, about elimination of previous records. The name on the document was Andrew Morrison, and there was a photo. It was Richard. Younger, with shorter hair, but it was definitely him. I sat there on the office floor for I don't know how long, just looking at that document, trying to make my brain process what I was seeing. Richard had been in witness protection. Richard wasn't really Richard. Richard had an entire life before me that had been erased, hidden, reconstructed. Who was Andrew Morrison? What had he witnessed? Why did he need protection? And more importantly, why the hell did he have multiple fake identities if he was supposedly already safe in witness protection? None of this made sense. Or it did, but in such a disturbing way that I didn't want to accept it. I started putting the pieces together in my head like a macabre puzzle. Richard traveled constantly, had multiple identities, had a disposable phone with messages about jobs and targets, had enormous amounts of money moving in different accounts, had surveillance photos of unknown people. My husband wasn't a financial consultant. My husband was something else, something much more sinister. And then, as if the universe wanted to confirm my worst fears, I heard the unmistakable sound of the front door opening. My blood froze in my veins. Richard wasn't supposed to return until Saturday. He was in New York. He had said he would be away for 3 days. But I knew the sound of his keys, the sound of his steps in the entrance hallway. It was him. Richard had come back, and I was in his forbidden office, with all his secrets scattered around me, with the drawer open and all the evidence of his double life exposed. I heard his voice calling me from downstairs. "Emma? Love, are you home?" His voice sounded normal, casual, as always. I went into absolute panic. What should I do? There was no time to put everything back in the drawer. There was no time to pretend nothing had happened. And even if there was time, I didn't want to pretend. I wanted answers. I deserved answers. But at the same time, a primitive part of my brain was screaming danger, was telling me that if Richard was who I was beginning to suspect he was, then I was in real danger now that I knew too much. I heard his footsteps coming up the stairs and knew I had seconds, maybe 10 or 15 seconds before he reached the office. My instinct told me to grab the most important evidence and get out of there. But where would I go? This was my house. My husband was coming in my direction, and I was holding his secrets in my hands. So I made a decision that to this day, I don't know if it was brave or extremely stupid. I stayed exactly where I was, sitting on the floor next to the desk with the fake passports, the disposable phone, the photos and documents scattered around me. When Richard appeared at the office door and saw me there, the expression on his face changed so quickly it was almost imperceptible. For a fraction of a second, I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before, something cold, calculating, dangerous. But then he recomposed his expression and assumed a look of confusion and concern that would have fooled me completely if I hadn't just discovered he was basically a professional liar. "Emma, what are you doing?" he asked, and his voice had that perfect tone of genuine surprise that would probably fool a lie detector. But I was no longer being fooled. I got up from the floor, holding one of the fake passports, and looked directly into his eyes. The question isn't what I'm doing, Richard. Or should I call you James, or David, or Thomas, or maybe Andrew? I saw something pass through his eyes again, that flash of something dark, but he quickly assumed an expression of resignation, as if he knew the game was over. He entered the office slowly, closed the door behind him, and for the first time since we met, I felt real fear of him. Not the kind of fear you feel watching a horror movie, but that visceral and primitive fear your body feels when it recognizes true danger. Richard, or whoever he was, sat in the office chair and watched me for a long moment before speaking. "How much did you see?" he asked, and his voice was different now, deeper, without that false warmth he always used with me. "Enough," I replied, trying to keep my voice firm, even with my heart beating so hard I was sure he could hear it. "Enough to know you lied to me about absolutely everything. Enough to know you're not who you said you were. Enough to know I married a complete stranger." Richard sighed deeply and ran his hands over his face, a gesture I had seen him do hundreds of times when he was stressed, and somehow that familiar gesture in the midst of all that insanity made me want to cry. But I didn't cry, forced myself not to cry because I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. He remained silent for maybe a full minute, which seemed like an eternity, and then started speaking. "You're right, I lied. About a lot. But not about everything, Emma. My feelings for you, our marriage, all of that is real. You have to believe that." I let out a bitter laugh that didn't even seem to have come from me. "Believe? Believe you? You have multiple fake identities, a secret phone with messages about jobs and targets, surveillance photos of people, fake documents, and you want me to believe our marriage is real? Who are you, Richard? What's your real name, at least?" He hesitated, and I could see the conflict happening behind his green eyes. Finally he said, "My real name is Andrew Morrison. Andrew was who I was before. Richard Thompson is who I had to become." So it was true. The witness protection document was real. "Why did you need to enter witness protection?" I asked, even not being sure if I really wanted to know the answer. Andrew, because I could no longer call him Richard in my head, looked at the window before answering. "A long time ago, I saw something I shouldn't have seen. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time, witnessed a crime committed by very powerful people, dangerous people. I went to the police, agreed to testify, and as a result gained enemies who would do anything to find me. The government gave me a new identity, a new life, sent me to Boston and told me to disappear. And I disappeared. I became Richard Thompson, built a new life, met you, married you, and for 5 years I almost managed to believe that Andrew Morrison didn't really exist anymore." I processed this for a moment, but there were still so many questions. "Okay, I understand the witness protection part. I understand you had to change identity. But what about the other passports, and the disposable phones, and the messages about jobs and targets? This isn't behavior of someone who just wants to live a normal and quiet life after witnessing a crime, Andrew. This is behavior of someone who's actively working on something illegal or dangerous." He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, I saw defeat in them. "You're right again. The truth is that witness protection wasn't enough. The people I testified against, they have resources, connections, never stopped looking for me. 3 years ago, I discovered they were getting close to finding me even with my new identity. I panicked. I contacted the agency that relocated me, and they said they couldn't do anything beyond giving me another new identity and sending me to another city, which would mean losing you, losing our life together. I couldn't do that, Emma. Couldn't lose you. My heart tightened for a moment, but I forced myself to remain focused. So, what did you do? Andrew got up from the chair and started pacing back and forth in the office. I made contact with some people I knew from the past, people who work on the edges of the law, people who get things. They offered me a solution. If I worked for them occasionally, doing certain jobs, they would protect me, protect you, and keep us safe from the people hunting me. The fake passports, the different identities, all of this is for the jobs. I assume a different identity for each job, travel, complete the task, come home as Richard Thompson, and no one can connect the dots. I could barely believe what I was hearing. What kind of jobs, Andrew? What exactly do you do when you travel? He stopped walking and looked directly at me. Things you don't want to know. Things that keep me awake at night. Things I know will condemn me when I die. But I do these things to keep us safe, to ensure you never have to look over your shoulder, never have to live in fear. I felt bile rising in my throat again. My husband was some kind of criminal, some kind of illegal operator who did dirty jobs for dangerous people. Do you kill people? The question came out of my mouth before I could think better, direct and raw. The silence that followed was the answer I feared. Andrew didn't say yes, but he also didn't say no, just stood there looking at me with those eyes I had loved so much and that now seemed to belong to a complete stranger. "Oh my God," I whispered, feeling my legs getting weak. "You kill people. My husband is an assassin." Andrew approached me quickly, trying to take my hands, but I instinctively recoiled. "I'm not an assassin, Emma. I'm not a monster who goes around killing innocent people. The jobs I do, the targets, are always bad people, people who deserve what they get. Traffickers, violent criminals, people who hurt other people. I only accept jobs I can morally justify, jobs where I know I'm making the world a better place by removing someone from it." That didn't make anything better. Actually, it made everything worse because now I was married to a vigilante, someone who had given himself the right to decide who deserved to live or die. "And Olivia?" I asked suddenly, remembering the photo I had seen. "Who is Olivia, and why did you write that she's your soulmate 6 months before we got married?" Andrew's expression became even darker. Olivia was my last contact with my life as Andrew Morrison. We were childhood friends, grew up together, and when I entered witness protection, she was the only person from my old life who found me. It shouldn't have happened, it was against all the rules, but she tracked me down. We met a few times, tried to rekindle something from the past, but it didn't work because I had already met you by then, was already in love with you, even trying to convince myself otherwise. The photo was taken at our last meeting, in June 2019. I wrote that on the back because I was trying to convince myself she was my soulmate, trying to convince myself I should go back to her instead of continuing with you. But I couldn't. I chose you, Emma, would always choose you. I didn't know what to think or feel anymore. Part of me wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that despite all the lies, all the fake identities, all the crimes he had committed, his feelings for me were genuine. But another part, the rational part that still worked despite the shock, knew I could no longer trust absolutely anything that came out of his mouth. "Where were you really when you said you were in New York?" I asked. Andrew hesitated before answering. "Chicago. Had a job there. But I finished earlier than expected and decided to come home because I missed you." The irony was almost funny. If he hadn't come back early, I probably would never have discovered anything. "And now?" I asked, my voice sounding tired even to myself. "What happens now? Are you going to kill me because I know too much? Is that what you do with people who discover your secrets?" Andrew looked genuinely horrified at the suggestion. "How can you think that? I would never hurt you, Emma. Never. You're the only good and pure thing in my life, the only thing that reminds me there's still goodness in the world. I love you more than anything. I know that means nothing now. I know I betrayed your trust in every possible way, but you need to know that every moment we spent together was real to me. Every laugh, every conversation, every night sleeping beside you, everything was real. You gave me a life worth living, a reason to continue even when everything else in my existence is darkness." I didn't want to feel anything hearing those words, wanted to be completely numb and immune. But I wasn't. Part of me, that stupid and romantic part that still loved the man I thought he was, felt a pang in my chest. "But you kept lying," I said, forcing hardness into my voice. "Every day, every night, you looked at my face and lied. About who you are, about what you do, about where you go. How can I believe anything between us was real when everything was based on lies?" Andrew sat heavily in the chair again, looking defeated. "I can't give you an answer that will make you feel better, Emma. I can't undo what I did. I can only tell you that every lie I told was to protect you. The less you knew, the safer you would be. If the people I work for, or the people hunting me, knew you knew the truth, you would become a target. Keeping you in ignorance was the only way to keep you safe." I shook my head, unable to accept that. "That's not love, Andrew. That's not protection. That's control. You took away my right to make my own choices about my own life. If I had known the truth from the beginning, maybe I would have chosen not to get involved with you. Maybe I would have chosen a different life, safer, more honest. But you took that choice from me by lying." He had no answer to that, just sat there looking miserable, and for the first time since he entered the office, I felt a small sense of power returning to me. I had discovered the truth. I knew who he really was, and now I had choices to make about my own future. I went to the desk and started gathering all the documents, passports, and the phone I had found. "What are you doing?" Andrew asked cautiously. "I'm taking all this with me," I replied firmly. "I'm leaving this house and going to a place where I can think, process all this, and decide what to do. Don't follow me, Andrew. Don't try to find me. If you really love me, if any part of everything you said is true, you'll give me that space." He got up quickly. "Emma, wait. You can't leave like this. It's not safe. There are dangerous people who could use you to get to me. Please, stay here where I can protect you." I laughed without humor. "Protect me? From whom, Andrew? From you? Because at this moment you're the most dangerous person in my life. You're the one who lied, who deceived, who built our entire life on a foundation of falsehoods. I need distance, I need time, and I need truth, and I won't get any of that staying here with you." I started walking toward the door, but Andrew blocked my way. For a moment, I saw real fear in his eyes, and it wasn't fear for me. It was fear of losing me. "Please," he whispered, and his voice was broken in a way I had never heard before. "Don't leave me, Emma. You're everything I have. Without you, I'm nothing. I'm just Andrew Morrison, the man marked to die, the man with no future. Richard Thompson only exists because of you. Our life only exists because of you." I felt tears starting to burn my eyes, but blinked to push them away. "That's not fair, Andrew. You can't put your entire existence on my shoulders. I didn't ask to be your salvation, didn't ask to be the anchor that keeps you human while you go out doing God knows what for terrible people. That's too much weight for one person to carry, especially when I discovered all this literally 20 minutes ago." He finally moved away from the door, recognizing he couldn't force me to stay, not without proving all my worst fears about him. I passed by him holding the documents against my chest and went down the stairs as fast as I could without running. I heard Andrew calling me from the top of the stairs, saying my name repeatedly, but I didn't stop, didn't look back. I grabbed my purse and keys at the entrance, stuffed the documents inside the purse, and went out the front door, heading straight for my car. My hands were shaking so much it took 3 attempts to get the key in the ignition, but I finally managed and accelerated out of the driveway, looking in the rearview mirror and seeing Andrew standing at the front door, just watching me leave. I drove without destination for maybe half an hour, just driving through the streets of Boston, trying to breathe, trying to think, trying to process absolutely everything that had just happened. Eventually, I found myself in the parking lot of a random cafe somewhere I didn't even really know where. I parked, turned off the car, and finally let the tears fall. I cried for everything I had lost, for the life I thought I had, for the husband I thought I knew, for the innocence of waking up every morning believing I was safe and loved and living an honest life with an honest man. After the tears stopped, I sat there trying to decide what to do. The logical part of my brain said I should go to the police, hand over all those documents, tell everything I discovered. Andrew had clearly admitted to committing crimes, multiple crimes, serious crimes. He was outside official witness protection and operating as some kind of freelance assassin for criminal organizations. The right thing to do would be to turn him over to the authorities. But there were complications. If Andrew was telling the truth about the dangerous people hunting him, then exposing him could put both of us in danger. And there was that stupid part of me that still loved the man I thought he was, that still remembered the 5 years of apparent happiness, the lazy Sunday mornings, the trips we took together, the plans we had made for the future. That Richard Thompson had been a lie, but the feelings I developed for him were real. You can't just turn off 5 years of love just because you discovered everything was based on deception. I picked up my phone and saw I had 7 missed calls from Andrew and multiple messages. I didn't read the messages, just blocked his number because I wasn't ready to deal with anything more coming from him. Then I called my best friend Claire. Claire and I had been friends since college. She was the only person in the world I completely trusted, the only person who had always been brutally honest with me, even when the truth hurt. She answered on the second ring. "Emma? Hey, I was thinking about you. How are things?" My voice came out more broken than I intended. "Claire, I need help. I need a place to stay. Something terrible happened." There was a pause on the other end, and then Claire responded with urgency in her voice. "Where are you? I'll come get you now." I gave her the cafe's address, and she said she would be there in 15 minutes. While waiting, I took the documents out of my purse and started examining them more carefully. The bank statements showed transactions of frightening amounts, 50,000 here, 100,000 there, always on dates that coincided with Andrew's trips. The passports were perfect, professionally made, impossible to distinguish from legitimate documents without forensic analysis. And then I found something I had missed before, another smaller envelope that was stuck to the bottom of the drawer and had come along when I took everything out. I opened the envelope and found a letter, handwritten on thin paper. It was addressed to me. "Dear Emma," the letter began in handwriting I recognized as Andrew's. "If you're reading this, it means you discovered the truth about me. Part of me hoped this day would never come, but another part always knew it would be inevitable. Lies can't last forever, no matter how hard we try to keep them alive. I need you to know that every word of love I said to you was true. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, the only light in a life that has been darkness for so long. Meeting you gave me hope that maybe I could be more than Andrew Morrison, the man who saw too much, that maybe I could be just Richard, your husband, living a simple and happy life. But I was wrong. I can't escape what I am, what I did, the choices I made. The past always catches up with us, no matter how fast we run from it. If you decide to turn me over to the authorities, I'll understand. I'll even be grateful because at least it means you're putting yourself first, which you should have done from the beginning. If you decide to simply leave and start a new life away from me, I'll also understand. You deserve peace, deserve honesty, deserve someone who can give you a life without secrets and dangers. Whatever you decide to do, please know I'll love you until my last breath. You gave me the best years of my life, gave me a reason to continue when all I wanted was to give up. Thank you for that. Thank you for loving me when I was Richard. Thank you for making me believe I could be a better person. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all the lies, for all the pain I caused, for stealing from you the honest life you deserved. With eternal love, Andrew. I read the letter 3 times, trying to process the emotions it provoked. Andrew had written this knowing that one day I might discover everything. He had anticipated this moment and left this letter as some kind of preventive goodbye. Did this make everything better? No. Did it make everything more complicated? Absolutely. Claire arrived exactly when she promised, her blue Honda minivan entering the parking lot and stopping next to my car. She jumped out of the car and came running to my window. I got out of the car, and before I could say anything, Claire wrapped me in a tight hug. "What happened? Are you hurt? Did Richard hurt you?" I shook my head against her shoulder. "No, not physically. But Claire, I discovered things about him. Terrible things. He's not who he said he was. Nothing about our marriage is what I thought." Claire held me by the shoulders and looked into my eyes. "Okay, breathe. Let's go back to my apartment. I'll make tea, and you're going to tell me everything. Can you drive, or do you want to leave your car here?" I thought for a moment. If I left my car there, Andrew could track it, could find me through it. "I'll drive," I replied. "Send me your new address," because Claire had recently moved and I hadn't visited the new apartment yet. "I'll follow you." The trip to Claire's apartment took 20 minutes, and during the whole journey, I kept checking the rearview mirror obsessively, looking for signs that Andrew was following me. But I didn't see anything suspicious, just the normal Boston traffic on a Thursday afternoon. Claire's apartment was in a modern building in the Beacon Hill neighborhood, a second floor with large windows overlooking a quiet street. We entered, and Claire immediately went to the kitchen to make tea, as she had promised, while I sank into her sofa, feeling emotional exhaustion starting to weigh on me. When Claire came back with 2 mugs of chamomile tea, she sat beside me and said, "Okay, tell me everything." And I told her. I told her about the locked drawer, about the multiple passports, about the surveillance photos, about the disposable phone, about the witness protection documents, about Andrew admitting he did jobs for dangerous people, about everything. Claire listened to me in absolute silence, her eyes getting wider and wider as the story progressed. When I finished, she remained silent for a long moment before whispering, "Shit, Emma, shit. This is like movie stuff." "You're married to a secret agent or something?" I laughed without humor. "Not exactly an agent. More like a criminal who does dirty jobs for other criminals. He basically admitted he kills people, Claire. My husband is an assassin." Claire looked like she was about to vomit. Okay, we need to think about this rationally. Are you in danger? Like, now at this moment?" I thought about it. I don't know. Andrew said he wouldn't hurt me, that he loves me and all that. But how can I trust anything he says? He lied about literally everything for the last 5 years. Claire nodded. "Right. So first thing, you don't go back to that house. You stay here with me as long as you need. Second thing, we need to think about whether or not we're going to the police." That was the question that had been gnawing at my mind. If we go to the police, what happens? Andrew will be arrested, obviously. But he said there are dangerous people looking for him, people who want to kill him for testifying against them in the past. If he's arrested, he's exposed. And he also said the people he works for now are dangerous. If I turn him in, I might be putting myself in danger too. Claire bit her lip thoughtfully. "But Emma, he admitted to committing serious crimes. Multiple homicides, probably. Can you really let that pass? What if he kills an innocent person on the next job? You'd be partially responsible for not going to the police when you had the chance." She was right, of course. But there were layers of complexity Claire didn't completely understand because she hadn't been married to Richard for the last 5 years, hadn't shared a life with him, hadn't built dreams and plans with him. "I know," I admitted miserably. "Logically, I know what I should do. But it's so complicated. And there's one more thing I haven't told you yet." I took the letter from the envelope and handed it to Claire. She read in silence, and when she finished, looked at me with a mixture of pity and concern. "He knew you were going to find out eventually. He prepared for this." I nodded. "Which makes everything worse somehow. It means he consciously chose to keep lying, even knowing everything would eventually fall apart. He chose to have these years with me, knowing they were borrowed, that they were based on falsehood." We spent the next hours talking in circles, weighing options, considering consequences. Claire was incredible, listening patiently while I processed aloud all the chaotic thoughts in my head. Around 8 in the evening, we ordered Chinese food and tried to watch some show on TV to distract ourselves, but it was useless. My mind kept going back to Andrew, to the house, to the life I had left behind just hours ago. My phone rang around 9, an unknown number. I ignored it. It rang again 5 minutes later, another unknown number. Andrew was trying to reach me through other phones. I blocked that number too. The third time it rang, I answered angrily. "Stop calling, Andrew. I said I needed space." But the voice on the other end wasn't Andrew's. It was a female voice, soft and slightly tense. "Emma Thompson? My name is Agent Sarah Chen from the FBI. I need to talk to you about your husband, Richard Thompson. Or should I say, Andrew Morrison." My blood froze. The FBI? How did they know? Why were they calling me? "How did you get my number?" I managed to ask. "We've been monitoring your husband for some time, Mrs. Thompson. We know you discovered something today. We know you left your residence with documents belonging to him. We need to talk. It's extremely important, both for your safety and for an ongoing investigation." I looked at Claire with wide eyes, and she whispered, "What is it? Who is it?" I covered the phone with my hand and whispered back, "FBI." Claire went pale. I went back to the phone. "I don't know if I should talk to you without a lawyer." Agent Chen sighed. "You have every right to have legal representation, Mrs. Thompson. But time is essential here. Your husband is involved in something much bigger than you imagine, and you may be in significant danger now that he knows you discovered his true identity. Please, meet with us. I can be there in 30 minutes. All we want is to ensure your safety and understand what you discovered." Every instinct in my body was screaming this was a trap, but whose trap? The FBI's? Andrew's? The dangerous people he mentioned? "How do I know you're really from the FBI?" I asked. "I can send you my credentials by email right now. I can also ask you to call the FBI office in Boston and confirm my identity. My badge number is 4782. Please, Mrs. Thompson, it's getting late, and the longer we wait, the more dangerous your situation becomes." I looked at Claire again, completely lost about what to do. Claire took the phone from my hand and spoke directly to the agent. "This is Claire Morrison, Emma's friend. She's with me and is safe at the moment. If you want to talk to her, it will be with a lawyer present in a neutral location tomorrow morning. Send the credentials by email and we'll verify everything before agreeing to any meeting." There was a pause, and then Agent Chen responded, "I understand. I'll respect that. But please keep Mrs. Thompson away from her residence and away from any contact with Andrew Morrison. He's extremely dangerous, and now that she knows the truth about him, we can't guarantee he won't take drastic measures to protect his secrets. I'll send my credentials in the next 5 minutes. I hope we can talk tomorrow." The call ended and Claire and I sat there looking at each other. "This is getting completely out of control," I said, feeling panic starting to tighten my chest. "The FBI was investigating Andrew? For how long? What else don't I know?" Claire took my hand and squeezed. "Breathe, Emma. We'll verify if this agent is legitimate. We'll get a lawyer to accompany you tomorrow, and we'll deal with all this one step at a time. You're not alone, okay? I'm here." I nodded, trying to believe her, trying to believe everything would be okay eventually. But deep down, I knew nothing would be okay again. My life as I knew it had ended the moment I opened that drawer. All that remained now was to discover what would emerge from the ashes. Agent Chen's credentials arrived as promised, looking legitimate, and Claire called the FBI office in Boston to confirm her identity. Everything checked out. She was really a federal agent and really wanted to talk to me. We spent the rest of the night making calls, first to a lawyer Claire knew through her work in human resources, explaining the situation as vaguely as possible over the phone. The lawyer, a man named Marcus Webb, agreed to meet us early in the morning and accompany any conversation with the FBI. I tried to sleep in Claire's guest room, but it was useless. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Andrew, or Richard, or whoever he was, standing at the office door with that expression of defeat. I saw the fake passports, the disposable phone, the letter written in his characteristic handwriting. I saw 5 years of memories that now seemed stained, corrupted by the discovery that everything was based on lies. Around 3 a.m, I gave up trying to sleep and went to the living room where I found Claire also awake, sitting on the sofa with her laptop open. "Can't sleep either?" she asked when she saw me. I shook my head and sat beside her. "I was researching," Claire said, turning the laptop so I could see. "I searched for Andrew Morrison, witness protection, anything related. Didn't find much, which makes sense if he's really in protection. But I found something interesting." She clicked on some links and brought up a newspaper article from 2014, almost 12 years ago. The headline said, "Key witness in government corruption case disappears before trial." I started reading the article and felt my stomach sink. It talked about a massive corruption case involving high-level politicians, businessmen, and even members of the armed forces. A witness who had crucial evidence had been placed in protection but had disappeared days before testifying in court. The witness's name wasn't in the article, protected for obvious reasons, but there was a blurred photo of someone being escorted to a federal car. The person in the photo could be Andrew. It was impossible to be sure with the quality of the image, but the height, the structure, everything seemed to match. "Do you think it's him?" I asked Claire. She shrugged. "I don't know for sure, but the timing matches. If this witness disappeared in 2014 and entered protection, it makes sense that Andrew emerged as Richard Thompson soon after, and it would explain why the FBI is so interested in him now. If he disappeared before testifying, maybe they never managed to close the case." I continued reading other related articles and putting together a picture in my head. The case involving corruption had fallen apart when the key witness disappeared. Several powerful people had been charged, but then released for lack of evidence. There had been allegations of threats, of violence, of systematic intimidation to silence witnesses. If Andrew was that witness, then he had good reasons to be terrified, good reasons to think standard witness protection wouldn't be enough. People with that level of power and money could reach anyone, even in protection. So maybe he was telling the truth about why he assumed the fake identities and started doing the jobs, I murmured, more to myself than to Claire. Maybe he really was trying to protect himself and protect me by extension. Claire made a skeptical face. Or maybe he's a criminal who saw an opportunity to make money and invented this whole story to justify his actions. Emma, you can't start making excuses for him. No matter how scared he was, killing people in exchange for payment is wrong. Period. She was right, of course, but knowing the complete context made everything more gray, less black and white than I would like. If Andrew had really testified against such powerful people, if he had really seen his life be completely destroyed for doing the right thing, then maybe it was understandable that he had taken desperate measures to survive. But understandable wasn't the same as acceptable. Understandable didn't justify everything he had done, all the lives he had taken, all the lies he had told. When the sun finally started to rise over Boston, Claire and I had read everything we could find online about the 2014 corruption case, about witness protection, about fake identities. We weren't experts by any means, but at least we had some context to take to the meeting with the FBI. Marcus Webb, our lawyer, arrived at 8 a.m, a black man in his early 40s with an impeccable suit and a worn leather briefcase that suggested years of experience. He sat with us at Claire's dining table and listened while I told the whole story once again, from the beginning. When I finished, Marcus was thoughtful for a moment before speaking. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'll call Agent Chen and schedule a meeting in a neutral location, probably in a public cafe where there are witnesses. You'll tell her what you discovered, but you won't hand over the physical documents yet. First, we need to understand exactly what the FBI wants, what they know, and if there's any legal risk for you. You haven't committed any crime by discovering these things about your husband, but depending on what they're investigating, you may have inadvertently become a witness or even a person of interest. My job is to protect your legal interests above all. At 10 in the morning, we were sitting in a busy Starbucks in downtown Boston, Marcus on one side of me and Claire on the other, waiting for Agent Chen to arrive. She appeared exactly on time, an Asian American woman in her early 30s, wearing jeans and a discreet jacket, nothing that drew attention. She sat across from us and immediately showed her official FBI credentials. "Thank you for agreeing to meet, Mrs. Thompson," she said, her voice professional but not cold. "I know the last 24 hours must have been extremely difficult for you." Marcus intervened before I could respond. "Agent Chen, I'm Marcus Webb, Mrs. Thompson's legal representative. Before we begin, I need to clarify some things. My client is not under investigation, correct? She's not a suspect in any crime?" Agent Chen shook her head. "No, Mrs. Thompson is not a suspect of anything. She's a victim in this situation, someone who was deceived and manipulated by a skilled criminal. What we want is her cooperation to help our investigation of Andrew Morrison." Marcus nodded. "Right. And what guarantees can you offer about her safety? If Andrew Morrison is as dangerous as you suggest, and if there are other dangerous people involved, what measures are being taken to protect my client?" Agent Chen leaned forward. "We can offer immediate police protection if necessary. Depending on the threat level, we can even consider putting Mrs. Thompson temporarily in protective custody. But first, we need to understand what she knows and what she discovered." So I spent the next hour telling everything again, from the locked drawer to the confrontation with Andrew to fleeing with the documents. Agent Chen asked specific questions occasionally, taking notes in a small notebook. When I mentioned the multiple passports with different names, her eyes lit up with interest. "James Mitchell, David Harrington, Thomas Bradley," she repeated. "We've been tracking these identities for months. Each one of them is linked to specific events in different cities. James Mitchell was in Denver when a pharmaceutical executive died in an apparent car accident. David Harrington was in Seattle when a defense attorney disappeared. Thomas Bradley was in Miami when a drug dealer was found dead in his apartment." I felt nausea returning. "So Andrew really killed all these people?" Agent Chen nodded grimly. "We believe so. We have circumstantial evidence linking these identities to the crimes, but Andrew is extremely careful. He never leaves physical evidence, is never clearly seen on security cameras, always has carefully constructed alibis. That's why your discovery is so important, Mrs. Thompson. The documents you have may be the direct evidence we need to finally arrest him and bring justice for his victims." But then I remembered something Andrew had said. He said he only accepted jobs against bad people, traffickers, criminals, violent people. Is that true? Were the people he killed criminals too? Agent Chen hesitated before answering. "It's complicated. Some of Morrison's victims were indeed criminals, people involved in illegal activities, but others weren't. The pharmaceutical executive in Denver was about to testify in a fraud case against his own company. The lawyer in Seattle represented a client who had information about money laundering. Morrison works for whoever pays, Mrs. Thompson. Sometimes his targets are criminals, sometimes they're just inconvenient people for his employers. He's not a vigilante doing justice. He's a professional assassin working for the highest bidder." This collided against the image Andrew had painted of himself, the idea that he only killed people who deserved it. But of course he would lie about that too, as he lied about everything else. Marcus asked the question I was thinking. And what about his story about being in witness protection? About having testified against powerful people and being on the run from them? Agent Chen sighed. That part is actually true. Andrew Morrison was placed in witness protection in 2014 after testifying about a massive corruption case, but he disappeared from the program less than a year later, before his testimony could be used in court. We don't know why he fled, if it was because he was scared or if he had other motives. What we know is he resurfaced as Richard Thompson and started his criminal career soon after. So yes, There are people who would like to see him dead because of what he testified, but that doesn't justify the crimes he's committed since then. I processed all this, trying to fit the pieces into a coherent picture. Andrew had started as someone trying to do the right thing, testifying against corruption. But something had gone wrong. He had gotten scared or disillusioned, or maybe he simply saw an opportunity to use his new skills of assuming identities for personal gain. Either way, the man I knew as my husband was a professional assassin who had built a fake life with me while continuing to kill people for money. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice coming out tired. Agent Chen looked directly into my eyes. "We need the documents you took, Mrs. Thompson. They're crucial evidence. And we need you to testify about what you discovered, about the confrontation with Andrew, about everything. With your testimony and the physical evidence, we can finally get an arrest warrant and shut down his criminal activities." Marcus intervened again. "And in exchange, what protection does my client receive? What guarantees does she have?" Agent Chen didn't hesitate. 24-hour police protection until Andrew is captured. After that, we can discuss relocation if she feels it's necessary. She won't be required to enter formal witness protection unless she determines she wants to, but we'll offer all necessary resources to keep her safe. I looked at Marcus, who nodded subtly, indicating the offer was reasonable. I looked at Claire, who squeezed my hand in support. Then I looked back at Agent Chen and said the words I knew there was no going back from. "Okay, I'll cooperate. I'll give you the documents and I'll testify. But I want Andrew arrested as soon as possible. Not just for the crimes he committed, but because I need closure. I need to know it's over, that I won't spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder." Agent Chen smiled, a sad but understanding smile. "We'll get him, Mrs. Thompson. I promise you that." We spent the rest of that morning at the FBI office, me formally handing over the documents as evidence, giving a detailed statement, answering hundreds of questions about my life with Andrew, about his trips, about his routines, about anything that could help locate and arrest him. It was exhausting and emotionally draining, reliving every memory now tainted by the truth. When we finally left the FBI office, it was already 4 p.m, and there was a police car assigned to follow me wherever I went. My protection had officially begun. Claire had to go back to work, so Marcus drove me to a discreet hotel the FBI had arranged as temporary accommodation. It was a modest but clean place, a suite with a separate living room where the officer assigned to my protection, Officer James Rodriguez, would be stationed. I spent that night alone in the hotel room, watching TV without really seeing anything, trying to process how my life had transformed so completely in just 2 days. 48 hours ago, I was happy, ignorant, living a life I thought was real and safe. Now I was in a hotel under police protection, having turned my husband over to the FBI, waiting for him to be arrested for multiple murders. How had things changed so fast? Agent Chen called me the next morning with news. "We tried to arrest Andrew at your residence last night, but he wasn't there. The house was empty. Looks like he took some things and fled. We issued a federal arrest warrant and alerted all law enforcement agencies. We also put alerts on all his known names at airports and borders. It won't be easy for him to escape." But I knew Andrew, knew how careful he was, how meticulous in his planning. If he had decided to disappear, it would be very difficult to find him. "What if he's never found?" I asked. "Do I stay in police protection forever?" Agent Chen sighed. "We'll find him eventually, Mrs. Thompson. It may take time, but people like this always make a mistake eventually. And when he does, we'll be waiting." But days turned into weeks, and Andrew remained missing. I moved to a new apartment in another part of the city, a place no one from my previous life knew. I continued working as a graphic designer, but mostly from home, rarely going out except when necessary. The officer assigned to my protection changed a few times as shifts rotated, but there was always someone around. My life had become a strange kind of limbo, stuck between the past that wasn't real and a future I couldn't imagine. And then, on a rainy Tuesday in April, exactly 6 weeks after everything began, I received a call from an unknown number. Normally I wouldn't answer, but something told me to answer this time. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Emma." It was Andrew. His voice sounded exactly as I remembered, that same deep and soft voice that once comforted me and now made me tremble. "How did you get this number?" I asked, my voice coming out firmer than I felt. Officer Rodriguez, who was in the room, immediately became alert and started tracing the call. "I have my resources," Andrew replied. "Listen, I don't have much time, so I need to talk fast. I know you turned me into the FBI. I know they're looking for me. I don't blame you for it, Emma. You did what you thought was right. But I need you to know something. I need you to know that everything I said about loving you was true. You were the only real thing in a life of lies." I felt tears starting to form, but forced them back. "If you really loved me, you would have been honest with me from the beginning. You would have given me the chance to choose if I wanted to be part of this life." There was silence on the other end for a moment. "You're right. I was selfish. I saw a chance for happiness and grabbed it without thinking about the consequences for you. I'm sorry for that, more than you'll ever know." Officer Rodriguez was making frantic signals, indicating they were close to tracing the location. I needed to keep him on the line. "Where are you, Andrew? This can't go on forever. Eventually they'll get you." He laughed without humor. "Maybe, or maybe I'll really disappear this time. I have more identities they don't know about, more resources they can't track. I can start over somewhere, become a completely different person." The idea of him simply disappearing, never facing justice for what he did, made me angry. "And the people you killed? Don't they deserve justice? Don't their families deserve closure?" There was another long silence. "You're right about that, too. There's a lot of blood on my hands, Emma. Much more than you know. I started thinking I was doing the right thing, eliminating bad people, protecting myself and you. But somewhere along the way, I lost my way. I became exactly the kind of monster I used to fight against." His voice broke slightly, and I thought maybe he was crying. "Why are you calling me, Andrew? What do you want?" I asked. "I wanted to hear your voice one last time," he replied softly. "I wanted to say goodbye properly, and I wanted to tell you I left something for you. A bank account, just in your name, with enough money for you to start over if you want. Clean money, not from any of the jobs, just savings I made over the years. The details are in a letter I sent to Claire's address. I don't want you to have to struggle financially because of my mistakes." I didn't know how to feel about this. Money from him seemed tainted regardless of where it came from. "I don't want your money, Andrew." He sighed. "I know. But it's there if you change your mind. And Emma, take care. The people I worked for, they're not happy with Betrayal. I no longer have any connection with them, so they can't use me to get to you. But still, stay alert. The FBI will keep you safe, but don't trust anyone completely, not even them." Before I could ask what he meant by that, the line went dead. He had hung up. Officer Rodriguez cursed. "We lost him. The call was routed through multiple servers in different countries. It's impossible to trace." I sat there, the phone still in my hand, processing that final conversation with the man I had loved, the man who had betrayed me so completely. Part of me was relieved he had disappeared, that I wouldn't have to see him be arrested and tried, face all that pain again in public. But another part was frustrated that he was escaping, that he would never face real justice for what he did. 2 days later, a letter arrived at Claire's apartment, as Andrew had said. Inside was information about a bank account in my name containing $250,000. There was also another letter, longer this time. In it, Andrew detailed his entire life, starting with his childhood in New York, a normal boy from a middle-class family who grew up wanting to make a difference in the world. He told about how he went to work for the government as an auditor, how he discovered the massive corruption he eventually testified against, how it completely destroyed his life. He wrote about the months in witness protection, living in constant paranoia, hearing that the people he had exposed were making threats against him, that there were contracts on his life. He described how he fled from witness protection, not because he was a coward, but because he realized the same people who were supposed to protect him were compromised, that the corruption went deeper than anyone imagined. And then he wrote about how he survived, how he used the skills he had learned in government to create fake identities, how he was eventually recruited by the criminal organization that needed someone with his specific skills. The letter detailed each job he had done, each person he had killed, and Andrew was right. They were mainly criminals and bad people. But not all. There were 3 targets who were apparently innocent, people who simply knew too much about wrong things. Andrew admitted in the letter that those 3 still haunted him, that he would never be able to forgive himself for taking those lives. He concluded the letter like this: Emma, you deserved a better man than I could be. You deserved honesty, you deserved safety, you deserved love without complications. I gave you what I could, knowing it would never be enough. If I could go back and do everything differently, I would. I would tell the truth from the beginning and let you decide. But I can't go back. I can only move forward. I'm going to disappear now. I'm going to become another person somewhere where no one knows me. Maybe there I can find some kind of redemption, some way to make up for the evil I did. Or maybe I'm just a man running from his consequences until the day they finally catch up with me. Either way, you'll always be the best part of my life, the only pure thing in the midst of so much darkness. Thank you for loving me when I was Richard. Thank you for giving me those 5 years of happiness. I'll carry these memories with me wherever I go. Be happy, Emma. Find someone who can give you the life you deserve. Forget Andrew Morrison. Forget Richard Thompson, and live the life you always should have had. With eternal love, Andrew. I read the letter 5 times, crying through each reading. It was some kind of closure, I suppose, but not the kind I wanted. I wanted pure anger. I wanted to hate him completely without complications. But life is rarely that simple. Yes, Andrew had lied and deceived and committed terrible crimes. But he had also loved me the best way he knew how, had tried to protect me in his twisted way, and was now living as a fugitive because he couldn't reconcile who he had become with who he used to be. In the following months, life slowly returned to some kind of normalcy. The FBI eventually reduced my protection to occasional check-ins after it became clear Andrew had really disappeared and no one was coming after me. I went back to working normally, reconnected with friends I had neglected, started therapy to process all the trauma. I initiated divorce proceedings, legally divorcing Richard Thompson, a man who technically didn't even exist. I decided to accept the money Andrew had left, not because I wanted it from him, but because I thought I could do some good with it. I donated most of it to organizations that help crime victims, families of murdered people, witness protection programs. I kept some to restart my own life. I moved cities eventually, went to San Francisco where no one knew me and no one knew my story. I started again from scratch, building a life based on truth this time. I met new people, made new friends, and after 2 years, even started dating again, although it was terrifyingly difficult to trust someone after everything I went through. Andrew was never found. Sometimes I wonder where he is, if he really found some kind of peace, or if he's still looking over his shoulder waiting for his past to catch up with him. Agent Chen still calls me occasionally with updates, but it's been years without any real clue. It's as if Andrew Morrison ceased to exist completely, dissolved into thin air, as if he was never really here. And me? I learned that people are complicated, that love and deception can coexist, that you can spend years with someone and still not really know them. I learned that trusting again after betrayal is the hardest thing I've ever done, but also the most necessary if I want to live a full life. I learned that secrets have weight, and that locked drawer in Andrew's office was full of more weight than I could have imagined. Mostly, I learned I'm stronger than I thought. I survived the discovery that my husband was an assassin. I survived the betrayal, the fear, the uncertainty of everything. And I didn't just survive, but rebuilt. My life now isn't what I imagined having, but it's mine, genuine and true, without locked drawers or fake identities. So if you're reading this and relate to my story, if you have that persistent feeling that something isn't right in your relationship, if there are parts of your partner's life that don't make sense, trust your instinct. Sometimes that small voice in your head is trying to protect you from truths you're not ready to see yet. And yes, opening that drawer, asking those difficult questions, confronting those lies will hurt. It will destroy the life you know. But living in a lie hurts more in the long run, and you deserve to live in truth, no matter how painful that truth is. Today, 5 years after that Thursday in March that changed everything, I can honestly say I'm happy. Not in the same way I was when I was ignorant, but in a deeper and more real way. I'm happy because I know who I am, because I built a life based on honesty, because I faced the worst betrayal imaginable and survived. And if one day Andrew Morrison appears again, if he's finally caught and brought to justice, I'll be ready. I'll testify against him if necessary, not for revenge, but because it's the right thing to do. Because his victims deserve justice, their families deserve closure, and Andrew deserves to face the consequences of his choices. But until then, I'll continue living, continue growing, continue building the life I always deserved. And you? Those of you who read my story to the end, who invested time in understanding my journey, I hope you take something from this with you. I hope you're brave enough to open the locked drawers in your own lives, to ask the difficult questions, to demand the truth even when it's scary. Because in the end, the truth always sets us free, even when it first destroys us. Comment below if you've been through something similar, if you've discovered devastating secrets about someone you loved. How did you deal with it? How did you rebuild? I'd love to hear your stories, and maybe we can support each other on this journey of healing and rebuilding. And if you liked this story, if it touched you in some way, please subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and share with other people who might need to hear this. Sometimes, knowing we're not alone in our suffering is the first step to healing. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for caring. And remember, you're stronger than you think, more resilient than you imagine, and you deserve true and honest love. Always.